We're talking about the art made for the dukes, and we learn about their taste in the major patronage project of Philip the Bold, the Chartreuse de Champmol, filled with painting and sculpture. We learn in this paragraph that it's an entire monastery constructed for the tomb of the Duke and his family. Here you see his tomb made of alabaster, with alabaster figures beneath it, and behind it the altarpiece that the textbook discusses in depth. Notice that this altarpiece combines painting and sculpture. As a triptych, its wings fold closed to present painting on the outer panels. When opened, viewers see something different. The opened panels are filled with wooden carved figures presenting sacred stories, but entirely covered in gold. This world of gold creates a feeling of a heavenly realm, glorious, shining, and magnificent. So the altarpiece is the work of a painter, Melchior Broederlam, working in conjunction with a sculptor, who they don't list. They do. They do. I forgot it's up here. They list up here the sculptor Jacques de Bers. A quick related point, if you skip ahead to 19.5, the Germanic lands, you'll see a similar example of a multi-part altarpiece. Oh, there it was. I went too fast. That mixes painting and sculpture. And I wanted you to see that this was actually a very preferred way of making an altarpiece in the North. It was their favorite approach to mix the kind of carved wooden figures that are mostly gold, sometimes with some touches of color, with the colored panels of paintings. Keep in mind that the actual work, the labor of the sculpture would have taken longer and would have been considered more expensive than the painting. That'll be interesting later. Coming back here, a key point is that the painted panels by Broederlam are a good example of international Gothic style. See here how they describe it. They're fanciful, miniature architectural and landscape settings. By fanciful, they mean a delicate fairy tale quality to the architecture and the mountains as an environment for these figures. The architecture has depth, definitely, but it is miniaturized out of scale to the figures and seen in cutaway view like a dollhouse. At the same time, it has all sorts of very precise little details, and they're all very pretty details, which again give it a quality of being both very realistic and not realistic. So one of the features of International Gothic is that the artists love to give you wonderful detail, as if you are having almost a microscopic view. You can see into this back room with its tile, and you can see the wood paneling on the door, but at the same time, you get a macroscopic view. You see the majestic mountain, and you see the height of the building. So you see the big view that captures things on a large scale at the same time that you get a very tiny view. And this perspective shifts back and forth between those two deliberately. That's what the International Gothic artists want to do, to cram this artwork with as much detail, delicacy, and interest as possible while making it seem naturalistic. If you go back a page to where you first learn about International Gothic, that's where they say landscape and architectural settings are miniaturized. However, details of nature are rendered in breathtaking detail. Note what they say about spatial recession. It is represented by rising tiled floors and rooms that are like stage sets, fanciful mountains and meadows. You are seeing that here, and you will actually see it in the next page when we look at a major manuscript, an illuminated manuscript. So here's a little look ahead to what we'll be studying. And again, you kind of have miniaturized architecture in a landscape setting. So one of the things they're doing, your textbook authors, is to help you see why dukes loved International Gothic. The brilliantly seductive colors, all of these elements were very appealing to the royals, the aristocrats at their courts. Then interestingly, they kind of go in a different direction. They come down here, lower on the page, to the sculptor who did much of the work for the tombs, Klaus Schluter. And the important idea here is that he's actually going in a different direction. They explain that he took over when a previous sculptor had died, and they present to you this very famous Well of Moses, and you'll want to read in detail what they have to say, but a main point has to do with the bodies again. Just like we compared Duccio and Giotto's bodies, here, these bodies have enormous heft, and as the textbook explains, they were highly realistic, especially when they had original details like metal used for buckles and even eyeglasses, and they were painted. So they had this rich coloring like you see in the International Gothic. Yet the point here is that their form, their quality as figures is different from the elegant aristocrats that we see in the International Gothic. They're described as vigorous, imposing, and highly individualized. They abandon the idealized faces, elongated figures, and vertical drapery of International Gothic. So he actually manages to be a bridge between a kind of heightened realism and the rich colors that the patrons liked. He's figuring out how to do something new within an established context. Some of his most famous figures are called pleurants, which comes from it is French from the word pleur, to cry. They are those who cry. They're mourners. They're grieving figures, and they're incredibly lifelike. And they're all around the base of the tomb of Philip the Bold. In individualized postures and gestures, and you can see how Schluter is a little bit like Giotto, really expressing emotion through a dynamically moving body, as if the body is communicating what's going on inside. The psychology is being expressed in gesture and movement. This one is, of course, very haunting, expressed just simply in the act of covering the face as a gesture of mourning. Another one, and they're sort of similar to some of the figures we saw in Giotto with the back turned to us. And so I'm wanting you to be aware of how the Duke is patronizing a range of artistic styles, but always wanting lavishness and excellence.